Recently, I realised I was consuming way too much content. Every single time I felt bored, I would reach for my phone, scroll, and just get fed nonsense. Stuff about the news, wars, drama, different conspiracies, all stuff that I can't control, and it's made me feel absolutely awful. It's made me feel stressed about the future, put me in an anxious state, and just made me mentally scattered, and it ended up taking more from me than it was giving. If this sounds like you, listen up. This is why I don't keep social media apps on my phone anymore, and why you should seriously consider doing the same. So there's been numerous occasions in my life where I've deleted social media apps off my phone, and each time it has served me well. It's mainly short form, as typically I find that YouTube isn't really that bad, but watching short form after such a long time really just starts to wear you out. Like, you know when you finish a session of scrolling and you come back into the room and you just really struggle to focus. You know, things around you, they all seem weird. You've got a lot of brain fog and you have just a little bit more anxiety than what you did when you first started scrolling. This isn't normal. As humans, we're not meant to be in this state. We're not meant to be feeling the way we do, and we're not meant to be consuming as much information as we do. And this is going to lead me on to my point. I'm going to share an insight with you. So, short form content is very new technology. It's enabled us to be able to condense a lot of information into very small segments, meaning that you can get a lot of stimulation very easily, not just visually, but auditorily as well. You can get so much in such a short period of time, and you can do that constantly, one after another. You could be consuming, like, for example, nowadays, you can see more naked women than even the greatest of kings could in history. That's a lot of stimulation. That's a lot of work that is taking a lot of that would take the regular man to get, but you can get that at your fingertips. So this, especially with short form content, this has really started back with Vine in 2013. So this technology, it's not really been around that long. The human brain isn't made for this kind of stimulation. So I want you to think about all of history before 2013. You know, obviously with the exception of things like TV, but we can consider long form content to be less damaging to the brain. Us humans in the past have had to go out and do things in order for us to get stimulation. We've had to explore the world, we've had to engage with different people. But nowadays, you can just whip up your phone and you can get stimulation that way. It doesn't require any effort. So what short form does is that it creates a slot machine for your attention. So you know how in a casino you have fruit machines, right? You insert a coin and then it spins, and if you're lucky you get all the icons that match up, right? And you're gambling for this. You don't know what you're going to be fed, right? This is what gambling is. You don't know what the outcome's going to be. Short form content is like gambling for your attention. I'm just going to say this again. Short form content is like gambling for your attention, and let me explain to you why. Okay, so let me explain this to you. We've got long form content and we've got short form content. This is why short form content is so bad, whereas long form is actually better. So we start with long form. Obviously with long form, we still have our feed, which is fine because we get fed a selection. And the great thing about long form is you actually get choice, which is really good. We'll write this down. Choice is good. Similar to how you can choose to read a book, you can choose what television show to watch. Choice is good because it enables us to select what dopamine we want. This is healthy because it means we can be selective of the stimulation that we want, which is good, right? Obviously, to an extent, an algorithm can manipulate what we want and what we can see, but if we are disciplined with it, we can actually have a more intelligent selection, which is healthier for us, which means we can learn and we can improve ourselves. Compared to short form, we have no choice. Similar to how I mentioned about we gamble, I want you to imagine how in the fruit machines, they basically show you different icons, right? You don't get to choose what icons show up. The same thing occurs when you watch short form content. All you need to do is scroll down and then it will give you something new based on what the algorithm thinks that you want. Remember, this is what the algorithm thinks that what you want, not what is actually healthy. So what the algorithms are made to do is to keep you there, okay? The whole point of it is to keep you on the app, because the longer you're on the app, the longer you're going to see things like ads. And what's going to happen is when you see more ads, they get more money, okay? So the algorithm isn't designed to actually make you healthy. It's actually designed to make you an unhealthy person, because it's going to keep you on there for as long as possible, and it doesn't really care what it's feeding you. It wants you to be emotional, because if you're going to be emotional, you're going to keep going back and going back and going back. It basically you are gambling your attention, and they're basically a drug dealer and they're treating you bad. The next thing I want you to pay attention to is these words: reel and feed. So this is obviously TikTok doesn't really use this, but we can use the word. You can look at TikTok. We have reels and we've got feed. Now a reel is typically what's put on kind of like, you know, these movie things, right? So, and you're kind of fed, and it keeps getting fed, and it keeps getting fed, and it keeps getting fed. So it's kind of similar there. That keeps getting fed to you, but what you don't realize is that it's also fed to you. You are getting fed a reel that you have no choice of, because they want to make more money. And what's going to happen is, because you're getting fed and you have no choice of what you're getting fed, you do not understand the consequences of what's going to happen, and this is why your life feels like shit. So with this in mind, there is no wonder why you feel messed up all the time, and there's no wonder why I felt messed up from going back on it. So I like posting online. I post content on Instagram, and I just find myself at times, I will just find myself scrolling, and especially if the app's on my phone, you know how you see the icon, and because you know it's on your phone, you go and you just load it up and you just start scrolling. Before you know it, you wasted 20 minutes. You probably do this even if you're standing outside when you're uncomfortable. Even if you're trying to focus, you'll just sit there and you'll be scrolling. The problem with this is you're not even deciding how you're going to feel afterwards, because what you're doing is you're handing yourself over to the algorithm, okay? You're letting the algorithm show you stuff. And you have no, like I've said previously, you have no control over what it's showing you. And this is awful for you. So not only is it going to ruin your attention span, making it harder to live in the real world, but it's going to drain you emotionally, which is going to leave you feeling more numb, more tired, and more drained. This is why I say you should delete these apps off your phone. Basically anything that you watch short form content on. If you're watching YouTube Shorts, delete it. If you're watching Instagram, delete it. If you're watching TikTok, delete it. And God forbid you are watching Facebook, if you've got Facebook, right? Because we need to be intentional. You need to be intentional with the content that you consume. Gambling your attention, like with what you do with short form content, is one of the best ways to keep your life in the same place. And if you want your life to change, and if you want to improve yourself, it's one of the worst things you can keep in your life, because it's going to make it harder to have the focus on the things that will actually change your life. When you watch short form, you're putting your emotional energy into the things that you're seeing. You feel happy, you feel sad, you feel anxious, you feel covetous, you feel envious, you feel lustful. You're going through all these different kind of emotions that normally would take longer to come up if you weren't consuming short form content. And what happens is, when you leave a session of scrolling, let's say, you feel drained as a result of it. Think back to the last time you've done it. It's draining, innit? This is terrible for you, because when you're more drained, your willpower is worse. So you're more likely to slip into other bad habits. But not only that, if you did want to make a change to your life, it's going to be so hard, because you've already put a significant chunk of your energy into the emotions and the algorithm and the slot machine that is short form content. Because of this, I rarely keep these apps on my phone, simply because it's just so damaging. And by deleting these apps, you are allowing yourself to be more in the present. And what being in the present means is that mentally, you are going to be engaged with the world around you, which is something we want. So I want you to think, you know how you go into like a supermarket, right? And you see some people, they are full on NPCs. They are just not there. They're just doing the most dumb shit. You can tell they're not even thinking. These people are vacant. They're not living in the moment, right? And that's what happens when you watch short form content. When you're scrolling short form, you get shown pictures of people who look better than you, who live better lives than you, who have sex, there's women who are quite sexy. There's so much different stuff you're getting fed. There's wars, there's conflicts, there's dramas. What's happening is, when you're watching that content on your phone, you're actually tunnel visioned. Not just in a physical sense, but in a mental sense. You are diving into that other world, which isn't yours. And what happens is, mentally, you're clocking out. You're no longer where you are, because mentally you're in what you're being shown on your phone. What happens when this occurs is you leave yourself, and you start comparing to others. You start focusing on what you don't have. You focus on the women that you don't have, the women you can't attract. You focus on the physique that you don't have. You focus on the way your life is. And when you do this so frequently, you're constantly going to be putting yourself into a significant state of comparison. And when you're comparing a lot, you end up not being grateful for the position you're in, and you end up focusing more on that which you don't have, which takes you out of the present, and this is really detrimental. When you actually live in the moment and you live in the present and you're aware of your life and what's going on, it makes it a lot easier for you to consider your life. So I'm going to take you back to when I first deleted TikTok. It was around December in 2021, and I was sitting there in my room. It was late at night, it was dark, it was raining outside, and I was very depressed at this moment in time. I was very alone. I felt very isolated from everyone. I had no idea what I was doing with my life. And I was sitting there and I was scrolling through TikTok, and I was just getting loads of different motivational stuff come up, stuff about the gym, you know, the kind of like some thirst traps come up. And I had the realization that short form content is almost like an abusive relationship, because on the surface it seems to offer so much. You know, when you're bored, you can sit there, you can have a scroll, and it's entertaining, and it starts off entertaining, but the more you do it and the more you indulge in it, the worse it makes your life. And this is why I'm relating it to an abusive relationship, because in an abusive relationship, the abuser paints themselves as being this great thing, this great savior, and they're gonna help that person they're abusing. But over time, the mask slips, and this is what happens with short form. The mask starts to slip, and you start to realize there's something wrong. So when I came to this realization, I closed the app, I deleted it, and I've stopped consuming TikTok from this point on. After this, I quickly came to the realization that I didn't like my life, and that it needed to change. And this was because there was no longer this cushion for me. Most people in life have what I would call as a cushion. And what a cushion is it's something to basically soften the blow of your existence. So you know how, like, for example, if you fell on the floor, it would probably hurt. But if you fell on a cushion, it would maybe hurt a little bit less. So what most people do is their life is surrounded by stimulation. And because they're surrounded by stimulation, what ends up happening is they end up living a really mediocre life that they don't actually like, because they distract themselves frequently enough for them to not notice. They've got their work. Let's say you work a 9 to 5, right? You've got your extracurricular activities. So you watch TV. Maybe you've got the series that you're watching at the moment. You've got a video game that you play. You go out and you play golf on the weekend. You spend every waking moment either watching something. Most people aren't ever in a situation where they are alone with their thoughts. There's always something going on. They're always being stimulated. And this is one of the worst situations you can find yourself in, because when you're in this situation, you never get the opportunity to be able to think about your life. You know how, like, for example, we have shower thoughts, right? Shower thoughts occur because that is the only opportunity where most people have to be able to think about things. Because most of the time, they've either got music on, or they've got their phone on in the background, or they've got a video playing. There's always something taking place. You know, this is why shower thoughts occur, because then people can actually think. But when you have these things going on all the time, you think less. And when you think less, you don't ever really get the sense that something needs to change. When you give yourself the opportunity to be able to think and you take away that cushion from your life becomes really uncomfortable. And the reason why it becomes uncomfortable is because you realise you don't actually like it as much as you thought you did. The only reason you were comfortable with your life was because you were distracted by stimulation. You see, stimulation and comfort are the things that keep people in the same place. And this is why most people never change their lives. And I'm speaking to you directly now. If you want to change your life, you need to remove a lot of the distractions. So this is why you should remove short form content. You should spend more time not doing anything. Maybe you should dial down the amount of video games that you play or the series that you watch. Maybe you should go out and just sit there and be alone with your... When was the last time you sat there and you were seriously alone with your thoughts? It was a while ago, right? This is something that I employ for my own life, so I'm not talking to my arse here. If you want to change your life, you need to make your current situation more uncomfortable, and the best way for you to be able to do that is to remove stimulation, because when you remove this stimulation, you no longer have this barrier to distract you. And when you're no longer distracted, you can finally think and question about the aspects of your life that you're perhaps not too happy about. But you'll only be able to do this if you give yourself the courage to face your life and the dissatisfaction that comes with it. And only then will things possibly change. If you've got any thoughts on this, chuck it in the comments. Subscribe, it's a win-win for both of us, and I'll catch you in the next one.